Beyond.
Beyond.
And hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Dormish. I am your host for Beyond, episode 565. We have quite the show for you. We are going to be talking quite a bit about Red Dead Redemption 2. We're going to keep it story spoiler-free for you, but we're going to go a lot into our impressions that we've had time with the game, and you have as well. We'll be answering some of your questions. We're also going to go over the PlayStation Classic lineup, our revised top 25 PS4 games list, and a few other things. I am wonderfully joined this week by Max Scoville, returning from Japan.
Hey, yeah, I'm back.
Good to have you here.
Thanks.
Brian Altano, returning from Austin, Texas.
That's correct.
Just as crazy.
Howdy. Hello.
Howdy, partner.
Thanks.
And Barrett Courtney, who's going to be switching the show's cameras live from the show itself.
Prove it.
So
Jump around.
things are not going to go well for those watching the video.
Oh, well.
Now Alexia's messing
You're
with
doing
me.
that?
Oh, well, look at
no.
that.
No, I'm not.
Oh.
Yeehaw, Mima.
I never got one of those.
boy.
Yeehaw me ma.
This is going to be quite the mess. Can't wait to see what happens. We are going to jump right in, though, to Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yes.
All of us have been playing the game quite a bit. I've played about probably 10 to 15 hours or so myself. I think all of you guys have probably played more than me.
I have no idea how much time I've played in that game. I don't know. I
Yeah.
honestly don't know because I jumped immediately into it with horrible jet lag, fell asleep several times, got into the open world part, and then completely fell in love with it and got lost. And there's no place that I can find where it just has a clock of number of hours played. So
Yeah.
somewhere between 5 and probably 16 hours, something.
That's a good estimate.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't
probably at around 20, 25, but I've played on 2 different consoles now, so I
Right.
restarted the game over the weekend.
You're crazy, man. I saw you post that on the Instagrams or Twitters or whatever.
I didn't really want to tell that story here because it involves me turning my back.
Yeah,
on the
you've
PlayStation
traded
audience.
Code.
But
Yeah.
I still think it's crazy. Like you already had put like 12 hours into the game, and then you're like, I think it might be worth it to jump to another console. So
Yeah, I
you're
was like-
We
restarting
won't
it.
speak its name here, of course.
Yeah, the Wii U.
Yep.
No. So yeah, we'll just talk about
Yeah.
this game then.
I do think, interestingly, though, to your why you switched was a visual reason.
Yes.
Before the show, obviously, probably more will come out, so I don't want to linger on it too much. But a lot of players have been talking about how the HDR in the game doesn't really do much.
it's apparently like fake HDR.
It's like
The outrage.
it's SDR, standard dynamic range,
How
essentially
dare they?
up-resed. So people are like, why is there an HDR in here at all? People have noticed some blurring issues on PS4 Pro and some other stuff. So we'll keep you updated on that on IGN as we find out more. So I don't want to go
Which
too
obviously
deep
it's
into
in this game sounds for howdy darn rootin'.
Yeah. There aren't any howdies. It's just
It's just darn and
Saudis.
rootin'.
Yeah, it's actually a little more tootin' than rootin'. So it's
yes.
a huge problem, obviously. Especially after 6 years in development. I was hoping for more rootin' than tootin'.
More rootin' and
I would
yeah.
I would love to know the percentage of people who bought this game who do in fact have pro consoles and then displays to support them.
Yeah.
Like what percentage? Because I know that obviously people are going to have a conversation about it. It's not something to be completely swept under the rug.
Well,
but like,
I'll say anecdotally in reverse, I've seen a lot of people be like, "This is my excuse to upgrade to a Pro, to get a 4K TV, to get an Xbox One X, all that fun stuff." Because this is just one of those games where you're like, "Okay,
it's time to move over.
This year,
No,
I think, really has shown why, if you want to upgrade, you should, especially with God of War, this.
Are any of you guys playing on a base PS4?
I have not.
No.
Yeah.
I actually haven't seen the game there. I've heard from people just on Twitter because I had a whole conversation over the weekend about just how the game looks, and a lot of people were saying they were playing there, and it still looks stunning. So I mean, I can't imagine it's a bad looking game anywhere.
Yeah. Right.
I noticed my Pro sounded sort of like a helicopter most of the time.
Mine too.
Yeah, I haven't noticed that at all.
Actually, in the quietest moments too. Like when I'm out galloping around the world, which is what I want to get into. Yeah, it sounds fine, but actually, when I'm just like in a general store, my PS4 Pro is dying.
I will say, like, you know, just like for us to sort of get into it here, this is probably one of the slowest, most tedious in a deliberate way, sort of
absolutely.
methodical, multi-million selling video game ever made. Like, probably since like The Sims. Like, it's really odd to play something that's so like, it's like from the creators of of Grand Theft Auto, and you're like, yeah, this is gonna get crazy, right? It's like walk slowly over
Through the snow.
under the crescent moon and collect thistles to marginally increase your character's stamina. Then what? Do we get to like rob stuff? Sometimes, but if you take out your gun or nudge into a dog, there's going to be trouble,
First have a sip of your coffee.
Are you ready for the scenic grandeur of the American West and authentic wardrobe attire of the period?
Yeah, I mean, this is we've talked about on the show in the past. There's games like Bloodborne, which I think right off the bat weed out a lot of novice players and they go, get out of here. You know, this is too hard for you. This game does a really interesting thing where I think universally, we can all agree that the first few hours of this game are really slow to the point where, no spoilers, but the character starts off sort of like trudging through snow, and you're like, okay, slow,
And through
no
slow.
pun intended, and you're like, wow, Arthur Morgan moves really slowly in the snow in this game, but clearly, once the snow goes away, he's going to be running full speed. It's like,
Well,
If you
only
tap
if
X
you
a
have
lot.
your full stamina all the way up, and that's only if you have your stamina upgraded all the way up.
If you had your coffee in the morning.
Yeah, exactly.
But I want to talk about the beginning of this game is probably the best place to start for all of us, because I think a lot of what I heard from people who had played the game before I jumped in was the beginning is slow, but get through it and then it opens up. And I do want to know how that opening impacted all of you, because for me, going in with that expectation, I was aware of that and was like, okay, this is definitely as slow as people have said to me, but I understood that it would change.
I felt so immediately disappointed and sort of guilty.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I jumped into it, obviously, like sleep deprived, completely out of it, not really like. I was in Japan for 2 weeks. My brain was in a very different space. And then jumping in there for this game that I knew very little about and wasn't sure what to expect. I mean, I saw it in action, but like as far as like the story, I wasn't, it's a Rockstar does a really good job of controlling the messaging and keeping things really like a lot of surprises in there.
Yeah.
And I was immediately like, oh boy.
Yeah.
And then there was that kind of guilt of like, am I the only one who feels this way? Is this on me? Did I play this wrong? And then I talked to other people, and apparently a lot of people are having that feeling.
I was in a very similar boat, and we got our copies a little bit early, and I got it actually like right before I went to Austin, and I did a thing that they specifically said not to do in the NDA. I put my PS4 in my suitcase. Oh no! And I got on an airplane.
Probably shouldn't talk about that here.
Well, whatever. We'll see what happens.
Too late.
I love you guys. I hope everything's okay. Don't sue me. And so
no, this is the last time we'll ever see Brian alive.
exactly. And so I ended up playing a ton of it in the mornings and evenings around a shoot I was working on over the weekend, and I felt very similar in that, like, I was like, this is, am I missing something? Like, why is it like it's to open a door is sort of a slow thing. To get on a horse is a slow thing. To, like there are moments where he's like, I reckon I could go for about a half a can of kumquats right now. And you reach out and he's like you hold the button and it slowly concludes a wheel, and he opens up a door, and then you're kind of like, man, everything takes a long time in this game. And then something sort of clicks, and you're like, well, yeah, that's what it was like. Like everything was slow.
Tom Marks tweeted out like a really good sentiment here, where it's like there's a difference between like deliberately pacing something for like a story or for gameplay wise and just making everything tedious. And that's why like I'm 32 hours into the game, I still feel like all of that little stuff is still so freaking tedious. Where like, I have to like kind of fast pace walk but not fully run in the camp. Like everything's so spread out in each like area of the camp. So it's like, I'm at my bed, I should go to the butcher over there, but he's so far away.
I don't understand that mentality.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand. That's a thing throughout games, not just this game, but like when you're in an area that you're going to spend a lot of time in, any kind of hub situation, any kind of thing where you can't sprint.
Yeah.
Like, does
Where they
Destiny
take that
do
away
that
from
too, or just the fact that
No, you can run.
okay,
around
you can run,
yeah.
but in like any game where it's like they built this place out, obviously it's going to be an area that you spend a lot of time in.
Yeah.
And then add in elements that make it take longer to get between these things. And it's like the hub world I get for the sake of like world building and for kind of adding character. It makes a ton of sense to have it be like a realistic space.
Yeah.
But like for the sake of convenience, just make it a menu.
There's a lot of moments where you're like,
I don't want Red Dead to do that.
Yeah.
I like this.
No, there's a lot of moments in this game where you're like, oh, this is very deliberately like not like a video game that we're used to playing. And there's other times where you're kind of like, but I wish it was a little bit more like a video game.
Well, the thing is like, I think there are moments I kind of like when you go into a general store and you do flip through like the catalog book, but then there's other stores where it's just regular ass menus, and it's like, either double down or like lean into it or not. Like don't try to like sell me in this full immersion thing and then still make it a video game.
Well, that's one of the larger questions I wanted to ask all of you guys is do we think that Red Dead's aims to be realistic? Does it get too realistic, and does that hurt the experience at all? Because at least for me, what I see as sort of the central tension of this game is what it has been pushed as to us, which is the message of this is a realistic world that you're going to live in and inhabit.
This is more of a simulation than a game.
Yeah, but at the same time, it has those gamey systems in it.
I mean,
and the problems that I've had the most with the game are when those things kind of come to a head.
Yes,
and
exactly.
where the gamey things are not at a level enough for me personally where I can forgive, like there's odd things where you're trying to like interact with an object or put an object down, and the hitbox to detect that that prompt is so small and so finite because it's very realistic in terms of the space that it's dealing with, or flipping through a menu.
Weirdly enough, I was going to say this. It feels like this game captures a lot of my favorite moments in Hyrule Field and Ocarina of Time. Right?
Yeah.
It feels like a gigantic version of that. And I think back to that game, and I remember like this vast, unmined world full of treasures and secrets and stuff like that, but that also you would occasionally walk up to read a signpost and then hit a button and chop it in half by accident.
Yeah.
And so I think there's some of that here where you're kind of like, I meant to crouch, I meant to cover, I meant to go here, but I sprinted out and I did this, I did that,
I had my lasso unequip itself, and I was trying to capture somebody, and I just shot them in the head. And I don't know what happened there. I had another funny thing where I had a bounty on me, and I was like, I'm going to go pay off this bounty. I want to be a good, I want to have a clean record. And I ran into the post office too fast, and I scared the clerk.
Oh yeah.
Like I just sprinted into the door, and it was like, and he was like, the guy was like, oh, and then it was like, you can't pay your bounty. You scared that man.
I ran
it's so
into the
deliberately
sheriff's
silly.
office to get a bounty to pick up one, and I ran in too fast. And he's like, "Whoa, what the hell are you doing there, partner? Hold on." I'm like, "I'm here to do good. Hold on."
which I like. I kind of like all that
I
stuff.
do. Yeah.
So,
Hey, Sheriff, what's going on? I'll help you a lot. I'll help you fight the crime.
Yeah, like I like the systems there, and like they do a really good job of like under the hood of making the world all connect and making things react realistically to you and whatnot. But there's just a lot of weird little frustrations. Just with like pacing. But I do love like the Hyrule Field moment that you're explaining. Like I love going from point A to point B. A lot of people are like, not a lot, but people have been voicing their like, oh, like the fast travel system is kind of like lame in this. It's like, well, I think they definitely did that on purpose to make you go explore the world. And like, I love going from like all the way down. Like I'm right now in the story, I'm in like kind of like the southeast, and then having to go up for a story mission in like the northwest, and then taking like 15 minutes and putting on cinematic mode and just like watching.
Like,
until your horse hits.
To clarify,
I've never had my horse hit anything in cinematic mode, and I'm scared for the.
I
day
did like
after.
3
That's gonna
times
happen
in
to you
20
tonight.
minutes. Yeah.
To clarify, the fast travel is not unlocked from the start of this game. You get it by basically dumping money into your camp and increasing the impact of certain provisions and such. But even then, when you do have it, it's effectively a small map that has just a few locations on it,
and it's like a one-way system.
And it basically works as a one-way system. And you can go somewhere, and then you can ride your horse all the way back. And so much of this game is spent in transit. It is just riding over the open plains or going through like weird canyons and nooks and crannies all over the world. And if you're not into that, you won't like this game. But like I feel like in general, we're getting the negative stuff out of the way, which is good because then we can just kind of gush about how cool a lot of this stuff is. But for every single time you're kind of like, I don't want to ride over this thing again. I don't want to go over here. Something magical happens moment to moment in riding, like a sunset happens or like a thunderstorm starts or like you'll see a couple of animals like sort of fighting off in the distance or like you'll get sort of bombarded and attacked by like a gang and like a bear.
I had a couple moments riding. For me, my favorite parts so far have been those things in like the macro space of when I am just going through and like I happened upon a convict on the road and he's like, "Hey, free me from these bonds," and I just hogtied him and brought him back to the sheriff's office. Or like there's people building a house and a shootout breaks out and I help them to save it. So like all these little things that like that are emerging in the world are the things I love. It's more in the like moment to moment where you have to deal with a lot of little things. That's where my problems come up. But like you're saying, that Hyrule Field sort of aspect.
I think we do ourselves a major disservice by looking at this as either a conventional game or as a simulation because it's really kind of cherry picking from both sides. Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. But they've been pretty like unabashed going into this that this is a living, breathing world. This is like a microcosm. This is effectively Westworld.
Yeah.
Like this is a cowboy universe.
Even
to
more
explore.
Westworld when online comes in.
Exactly. And I wonder exactly what it's going to be like to interact with the people. Is it going to be sort of like seamless integration? I don't know what that's going to be like.
How many of your friends will you accidentally shoot?
Yeah. I mean, but it's strange because it doesn't like I feel like the core mechanics, the stuff that is really interesting here, isn't conventional. It isn't the things that we're all talking about, like the traversal and the shooting. It's these mechanics, and it's like all the stuff is in the margins. All the things that make it really interesting are the things that you can't really quantify because they don't really have like terms for them yet.
Yeah.
Well, I think what's so special about this game is, first of all, Arthur Morgan is an impeccably written character. He is like both charming and heartwarming and devious and dastardly at the same time, and he's trying to make things work in this weird world and in his own sort of, I would say like kind of past their prime type of ways. Like
he definitely
feels,
like gets a sense and knows that it's pretty much the end, and he like there's a lot of like little moments and even side missions that really show like he has a lot of regrets of how he let life kind of pass him by.
Yeah, and I think this is a country that's changing, a world that's changing. It is an ecosystem that's changing. They're bringing in more trains and power lines, and they're clearing out more fields, and it's like we're seeing a passing of a way of life that has existed for so long that has now become this new thing, and people are sort of struggling to adapt, and all these characters are interacting in that, and I think within all that becomes these really interesting things that sometimes are frustrating and sometimes aren't. But like, for example, there are towns in that game that when I know I have to go to, I sort of dread, because the last time I was there, I did such a horrible thing that returning to them feels strange. Like Valentine, I like many people have reported in this game, I tweeted about this the other day, but like I bumped into a guy on my horse and he fell and I didn't apologize, and he got mad and he called the sheriff, and the sheriff pulled out his gun, and my gut reaction was to pull out my gun and start shooting, because I'm like, Rockstar Games presents shoot everybody that moves. This is what you do in these games. No, it's not. And so I started this huge shootout. I ended up like on like the roof of a bar, like killing 9 guys. And like 30 minutes later, like I'm just like, I gotta get out of here. And I get on my horse and I leave, and they're like, you can't come back to this town unless you pay $260 or like hide forever. Yeah. And so I don't have that kind of money. So I just hide forever. So every time I go back in that town, I'm like quietly creeping along the back roads, and I'm just like, I got to go to the general store and buy some cheese, but I don't want anyone to see me. So, and like, that's insane. Yeah. That's insane that's my way of interacting with that game because of my own actions, that I have a guilt. And that's something that like this game does better than almost any game I've ever
played. The sense of space it builds.
The game has a morality system, but that feels so much more organic than the typical like, like
someone will remember that.
Yeah. Or like it makes a scary noise and it shows like a little downvote or whatever. We've seen that with plenty of games, like the first Red.
There is a morality meter there, but it's very much like I had that similar thing of I caused a bounty in Valentine, but I have such a sense of Valentine and the area around it, where for me it's like, oh yeah, I need to follow that path to get over there, and I can skirt the town if I go this way. Like creating that space.
There's a lot of video games where you walk into a place, you wreck shop, and then you walk outside and you come back in, everyone's like, hey, how's it going? Like one of the last games I remember where like there was a direct impact was like, and I talk about this game a lot, but Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. Not to keep comparing things to Zelda, I know it's a PlayStation show. Don't get mad. 3D Dot Heroes was great game, ported to PS4. You can steal things from the shop in Link's Awakening and walk back in, and the guy goes like, you stole from my store, and he kills you in the store, and they call you thief the rest of the game, which is one of the first games I played like that. But most games, you just walk in, wreck a town, walk out, and they're like, hey. And in this game, like, there's a mission you do in that town called Strawberry, which I won't spoil, but things go so horrible for everyone that they're like, you can't go back there for a while. And you're like, I know, I killed a lot.
I killed like half the town. There's a lot in there, and I obviously love the game. I was telling you, like, over the weekend, every single night, Friday night, my girlfriend fell asleep at like midnight, and I was like, okay, like I want to play a couple more like missions or whatnot. And the next thing I know, I look at my clock, it's 5 a.m. And so like there is a lot there that really pulls me in and like gets into this, like, I really love the story. I really love Arthur. I love that gang and like learning more about them, and like John and Dutch Vanderlyn is one of the most interesting written characters now. Like, I thought it was interesting, like having him be like kind of the last bad guy, sort of in Red Dead 1. But now, like, seeing him go through all of this stuff in the course of the events of the game, he is just a very interesting character.
They're all, I mean, they're all really interesting characters.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know. If this game didn't have writing the way it did, it would be just immensely frustrating.
Yeah.
And,
Like,
and that's the other side of it, where it's like I love all of these things, but there's still like the gameplay itself, like the moment to moment stuff of like they explain to you of like, oh, if you tap X to the rhythm of like your horse, like it won't lose stamina. And I've tried it for 20 hours and I still can't get like the fucking like timing down correctly. And I was like I know how rhythm works and it's bullshit. And there's like just like the shooting mechanics of like someone is chasing me on a horse behind me, and then like the mission wants me to like shoot them or run away from them, and I have to like look back, and like the horse doesn't know where it's looking, and it's like that's a system that was put in Breath of the Wild of like if you're aiming somewhere else, the horse was at least not dumb enough to run into a fucking tree or a person or a wagon.
Dude,
there's stuff like that in this game where I'm like, y'all made this game for 8 years. How was this not thought?
I specifically thought about that initial Breath of the Wild thing where like Miyamoto or whoever was just like, a horse wouldn't run into a tree. Horses aren't that stupid. And this morning I went headfirst into a tree, and like my horse and I were both like, oh!
And there's just like one more thing is the tracking system is so dumb and frustrating because they teach you the tracking system in the snow in the first chapter, and the way that it works, it's like you go into like the weird like eagle eye mode, and then you see the line and you press R1 and you go into like normal like viewing, and the line for tracking an animal is white, and the first time they show you this system, it's in snow, so you can't really see the fucking line that you're tracking the thing. It's just there's a lot of little things in the game that like kind of build up for me where I'm like,
calm down, you angry
I
video
know.
game nerd.
Again, I love the game. I put 32 hours in the last 4 days, so I'm.
And it's weird you're only still in the first chapter because you're so bad at games.
Are you like are you sleeping and eating?
No.
Like, in real life.
No.
You shaved, which is good.
I know. Yeah.
You know, some people don't even do that with their character in the game.
You can let that beard grow.
Oh yeah. All through one chapter, I refused to like shave it at all, and he was.
I'm
he was
growing it out. I want to have the dumbest looking dude. I currently have the smallest horse and the smallest hat, and it's.
Speaking of horses, from the Facebook Beyond group, that's my favorite transition, which is facebook.com/group/podcastbeyond. Benin Bova asks, what did you all name your horses? For the record, I'm riding a mare named King Diamond.
Cheddar cheese.
Good.
Mine is named Yanni. I don't know why. Again, I started the game when I was incredibly jet lagged. Yanni is currently maxed out and can drift. It is also the shitty $15 horse people make fun of me for owning.
Mine's like a filthy white horse with red hair.
Nice.
He just looks horrible.
Just like,
Just like really terrifying. Kids like see it on the street and cry.
It's so horrible. I was doing a mission where I brought a kid fishing, and I was like, I should clean my horse while I'm here. And me and the boy walked into the river, and the river was too deep, and the horse and the boy and I instantly all drowned.
I keep putting like animals I kill on the back of the horse and then riding through the woods, and they'll fall off. And I'm like, where did my pig and my pheasant go?
I really like this game. Like,
so-
Yanni, find to be my pig.
It is so like intentionally obtuse in so many ways. And it's so weird, and it reminds me of good God, the director. I forgot the name of this movie. The director of The Deer Hunter. Made The Deer Hunter, and it was like this incredible, like Oscar-winning, just mind-blowing movie. And then everyone was like, "You can make whatever you want next." And he made this like this Western that was like, I think critically like quizzically panned, and like it was just very like what. And I mean, the fact is like, Rockstar can make whatever the hell they want because they made GTA 5.
Right.
And the fact that they just got like carte blanche to do this, and they were like, we're going to make this game that looks like an Albert Bierstadt painting, and it sounds like a Coen Brothers movie, and we invented the sandbox genre where the operative terminology was you can do blank, and we're going to add to that by having you can do blank, but everybody will remember whatever blank was.
Yeah.
And like the fact that, I don't know, we're so sort of trained in Rockstar games to go around and screw around and do stuff. And it used to be like, oh, you get 5 stars and they send the SWAT team after you, and you hide behind a dumpster for 4 minutes, and then everyone's like,
and it's fine.
what were we doing again? And you're like, whatever, let's go listen to some ass rock.
Yeah.
And now it's like you owe money for that.
Yeah.
Like you're like, and it's not so much it's not really guilt, you know, like it's sometimes it is, but it's also
It's like a weight being put on you. You're like, oh, like I feel like I need to run run away from it or like.
Well,
run
I
up
think
to
the issue is when it doesn't feel like it's entirely your fault. Like I was going to this going to this house to do a bounty, and I come up over the ridge, and I hear like, I was like, what was that? And I looked down, my horse had trampled a dog, and so everyone in the town was like, animal cruelty, and I was like, no, and I started like apologizing to everybody.
Oh, no.
And then it turns into like a shootout, and then like all of a sudden I'm on the run forever, and the mission's failed, and I'm like,
Gotcha.
sorry, dog.
I personally haven't run into like any problems like that.
Have you run into
I've had a
dogs?
couple.
No.
I was
You'll
too,
know.
I was too enthusiastic playing a mission, and I like ran into town really fast, and immediately a guy walked in front of me, and I crushed him with my horse, and I just failed the mission, and I was like, well, fuck.
Yep.
What do you do there?
The one thing with mission structure that I really like is like there are a lot of like the mission does take into consideration if you're good at stealth or not. Of like, there's one early on where you're like trying to sneak up, and like if you like shoot someone earlier than Dutch says, he's like, dude, what the hell? Like, all right, we're doing this. Let's go. And there's one last night that I was playing that I was supposed to like sneak through like I was supposed to sneak through this building to get this document. And I got seen like the first step I took in, and like I had to shoot like 30 dudes, and then the dude that was like helping me with the mission like blew up, like distracted them, and then like afterwards, like he was like, "Why did you blow up that thing?" He was like, "You were supposed to go in quietly, you dumbass." Like I had to like cover your ass for that.
Yep.
That happened to me with I think it's in Valentine. You can go into one of the stores and essentially rob a back room. It's actually a tip on our IGN guides, which a huge shout out to the IGN guides team for that. This is the first game that I think all of the guides team has worked together on because it is so exhaustive of guide necessary, and they've knocked it out of the park with all of the cheats and all of the tips and everything. But I followed this one tip, and let me tell you, they forgot to add a step. You go into this back room, there's a like steel bolted door back there. You can't open that door. So as soon as you rob that room, the cops basically find out because you're right next to the sheriff's office.
Right.
And you have to gun like the guys in the back down. And so I was stuck back there. And basically that was how the bounty happened, because I had to kill like 3 cops to get out of there. And I was like, oh boy, that did not go well. So don't use that back door.
Did you get out?
I did, but
you
then
get
I got the gun, I got the money, but then I had to pay $90 to get the bounty off me. But yeah, the emergent stuff that happened has been my favorite. It was some of the stealth stuff too. I love the idea that you can sort of tell your gang to go ahead, or you can take the lead on that sort of stuff. I
read a thing on Reddit, and I don't know if it's true, but apparently somebody like went into a town and shot a guy in the leg, and then came back a couple days later and he had a wooden leg.
Oh no!
Like if
that would be amazing.
If that's what we're dealing with here, like what?
And for the record from earlier, Mike Cimino.
Michael Cimino. Yeah.
Michael Cimino went from The Deer Hunter to Heaven's Gate.
Okay.
Anyway,
Heaven's Gate was other perfect example, and I want to talk about this for a second. God damn it!
I have another transition
William
if you-
Friedkin directed The Exorcist.
Yeah.
Huge blockbuster box office success. The following movie after that was this movie called Sorcerer, which is about a bunch of oddball characters who have to team up. And in order to escape like this weird prison in this other country, they have to drive a truck full of dynamite to an objective. And Hideo Kojima has been tweeting out like covers of this movie, and I'm convinced that the Hauser brothers love this movie, and this was an inspiration for GTA 5 because it is like, it's how you get a bunch of characters who are very separate to team up with this core objective. And at the same time, Sorcerer was like horribly received. It was like a remake of an old French movie, and people were just like, what the you made Exorcist, then you made Sorcerer. What does this have to, it's about a truck with dynamite in it. Like, what is this thing? And I think it's one of the most video gamey movies that isn't like overtly video gamey, but at the same time, the thing about that is it has like a very clear, like the stakes are the kind of the central thing of the movie. Like the fact that it's like, here are people who want to get out, they have to drive the dynamite truck to get through. This game has no stakes. This game is very like, it's like, the world's changing and you can be good or bad, and I'm sure things will come out later on.
Yes.
But the fact that I am this many hours into this game, and like in the case of GTA 5, like you are very like upfront, you understand what everyone's dealing with. Like there's always been that sort of kind of, you are literally being chased by the cops. Like there's this kind of clear like, oh, you've got to get out of debt, or oh, you've got to like make a name for yourself in Liberty City. Like there's always, I mean, even in the case of Red Dead Redemption, the first one, like in this one, it's weirdly laid back, and the fact that the mission structure is so kind of like laissez-faire, where you're like, yeah, you can go hunt the pheasant, or go fishing with the boy, or maybe cause some mayhem and go on shootouts.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't a game to be mainline. This isn't a game to be speedrun. It's a world that you're supposed to just kind of be turned loose into.
Yeah, I was in between missions, and I just lived a few days like going to play poker for a bit and going to hunt, and it was like 3 or 4 days pass, and it's like, oh, all those missions are still available for me.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about that pace. As you mentioned GTA 5 a bit, Chris Woodside from the Facebook group also asked, if you were going to recommend one of Rockstar's franchises to someone who is new to Rockstar Games, would you recommend GTA 5 or Red Dead 2?
GTA 5.
Yeah.
I think GTA 5 is a borderline perfect video game. It's massive and huge, and I really adore it. It's like, I think story-wise, I think the balance of story depth and mechanics all come together pretty perfectly. And then if you want multiplayer, there's a friggin' MMO about living in LA.
Yeah, I'll add that GTA 5 is obviously immediately more instantly accessible, I'd say, to the average casual player. And the reason I say that is because it's one of the best-selling video games of all time, and not everyone who plays video games is like an expert, third-person, first-person shooter, like complex controls type of person.
Yeah.
GTA 5 is the kind of game where that like you can walk in and just steal a car and start going on mayhem runs, and it's fine. Like you get 5 stars, you go to jail, you come out, and you're good to go. This Red Dead is obviously, like we've been talking about it, it's a lot more deliberate, it's a lot more slow, it's a lot more tedious. I think there's a lot more beauty to it to behold for people who are willing to be patient with it and really like let it cook and sit in for a little bit.
Yeah.
But in terms of like, you want to play a video game immediately from Rockstar Games, yeah, GTA 5.
Yeah, hands down.
But I think that this one will have more reward if you really stick
What I
with it.
think is really funny is the titles. Like Grand Theft Auto, pretty self-explanatory. It's a game where you steal cars. Like that is the operative, like that is the namesake. That's always been the case. In this case, like this is effectively the third Red Dead game, and it's Redemption 2. It's redemption.
Yeah.
Like, this is not a game about this is not like Red Dead Revenge. This is like you're kind of seeking redemption. This is about like a sort of ethical thing, really.
I'm going to be a contrarian and say Bully. You should play Bully. That should be your first
In
Rockstar.
2018?
So
It's on iPhone.
those have been our thoughts on Red Dead Redemption 2. Obviously, we're going to be probably talking about this game for quite a while over the coming months, especially with Red Dead Online as well on the way. So look forward to that. Let us know, especially if you haven't joined the Facebook group. That, again, is facebook.com/group/podcastbeyond. Let us know how you're enjoying the game, what you like, what you don't like, and we'll definitely be talking about this game a lot more in the weeks to come. Moving on, though, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to take a quick bake.
Bake break?
Yeah, we're going to...
Yeah.
Dang.
Blaze
We're
it.
going to make a
Bake break.
cake because I've been watching Great British Bake Off, and then we'll be right back.
I still got bruises, you know. Lucky I went easy on you.
And we're back. We have a lot still to talk about, even with Red Dead 2 out of the way. We are talking about the PlayStation Classic lineup. We finally know the full 20 games on that list. I'm going to pull up a few of them. We knew a handful at first, which included Final Fantasy VII and a few other games. Now we know that the original Grand Theft Auto, speaking of Rockstar, is going to be on there. Metal Gear Solid is on there. The original Rayman, the original Resident Evil, the director's cut version. The first Persona, which is Revelations Persona, will be on there. Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six, the first Rainbow Six, the first Twisted Metal, Wild Arms, and a few other games. So we now have the final list. We know essentially the features of this system. And I want to ask to all of you, first off, right off the bat, do you think this list and what you're getting with the PS Classic justifies a $100 price tag?
Well, I mean, that's a tough question to answer because so many of these games are hard to get. They're hard to play on modern systems. I think to have this compartmentalized home for all of these things is great. I think the bigger issue is what's not here. And I think that, like, you know, we literally publish lists for a living at IGN. That is our whole business.
We'll get to one of those in a bit.
Exactly. We put together, we take a group of people here and we aggregate a list of things and we put it out there, and the top comments are always like, you missed this, you missed this. And for every one of those conversations, we're all debating with each other about it. There's no perfect way to say
There's no formulation.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. There's no definitive list of the 20 PlayStation games that you could put on this thing to please everybody. That said, I feel like there are some very big gaps here, and I feel like they exist specifically because of modern remasters.
Yeah.
And I think that
What you thinking? Like what games?
Crash Bandicoot.
And Spyro.
Yeah, Spyro.
I wrote a bit about this
Tomb Raider.
on the site. Yeah, there's a lot.
Did you put
Wipeout.
into consideration in the was Activision specifically not playing ball maybe with this? Like, is that less on Sony and more on those are Activision owns properties now, so that's their call if they want to have those on that system or not.
Well, so I did write a follow-up piece kind of about this exact thing of remakes and remaster culture doomed this list from the start because I think there are still a lot of great picks on here and a lot of games that now get the spotlight who wouldn't have otherwise. At the same time, they could have just made the list longer and add more games. But also, why would one company say, "Oh, you can have the game you remember on that thing bundled with a bunch of others, or you can buy our $60 newer version of it"?
Right.
And at the end of the day, they're going to want
It feels weird because it's like if you had, like, what's your favorite band?
Dashboard Confessional. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. So, like, if at Christmas,
It's the
like they
Beatles.
usually do, they're like, "Oh, here's the greatest hits album of Dashboard Confessional," but like 3 of their greatest hits
be
weren't
like 3
there
songs.
because they were
Shut
they were on some remastered album that came out 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You'd be like, "Well, I'm glad they're there because I can hear them there," but in terms of like this encapsulated, definitive collection of things,
Sure.
it's missing it. And so, as a modern gamer, yes, you have access to playing Spyro, to playing Wipeout, to playing Tomb Raider and Crash Bandicoot through many other means that have been ported to various collections. But in terms of having them all in one place, which I think the NES Classic and the SNES Classic did a pretty good job of doing.
Yeah.
That's debatable, obviously. There's no way of making that perfect. I feel like they're missing some stuff here, and that kind of bums me out.
I think that there's a big difference there. Is Nintendo has always been better at sort of ownership of things. Like they've always. You look at sort of the track record of the jump between the Super NES generation and the PlayStation generation, and like a lot of companies like Square Enix and I guess Konami were they were like, oh, let's go over here. And I don't know if that came down to some kind of weird fine print in the licensing where maybe it was like there are games that exist on Super Nintendo that never wound up anywhere else. Like I guess you did get like the Final Fantasy Chronicles, which was like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI, and it wound up on PlayStation. But I don't know enough about the business side from 20 years ago about what was and wasn't okay. But the fact that like Sony's first mascot is owned by Activision should tell you a little bit. Like their Mario is now no longer something they own.
Yeah.
Which is nuts.
Yeah, and I think that is the weird part about this is I think things that hurt the classic at the end of the day are business deals. We have no idea fully knowing the scope of. Like for me personally, I wanted Tony Hawk on there.
Yes.
But who knows how music licensing rights work 20
And
years
who
ago?
knows
in
what
video
the
games compared to
license
now.
for Tony Hawk games are right
now. Yeah, so there are all these weird. I don't want to say missteps inherently because I think they were working against the grain, obviously, with what they had to deal with. Though speaking of that, with saying there are blind spots from the Facebook group, Laura Maxine Cross asked, will they make a second PS1 Classic with 20 new games that didn't make the list? I don't think they will make a PS2 Classic anytime soon.
I think a PS2 Classic is more likely than a second PS1
What if they do the little
Classic?
baby one, little PS1 one?
A PS1
One
Classic.
Yeah.
Because we did ask them when they announced the PS Classic, and they said there will not be any sort of post-launch game support in this system.
Right.
So it is locked down to it like the SNES.
If
and
they
NES
had
were.
a way of putting in a memory card, like if they put games on like a memory card that looked like a classic memory card, you plug it in there, I would be super into that. If they were like, oh, here's an expansion pack for the PS1 Classic, but I think they were just kind of chasing what Nintendo was doing. And
I think it was smart, and we've mentioned this on the show before. It was smart / nefarious for them to be like, pre-orders are available now, and we were like, what are all the games?
Yeah,
on the list? They're like, it might sell out quick, so just buy it while you can. And so a bunch of people jumped on it, and now the list is here. Which, by the way, I don't think we have the Japanese list in front of us, but it's got some different stuff on it.
Yeah, I believe Parasite
slightly
Eve is
better
on there.
too. One of the things that I think Nintendo did a good job of, I was talking about this with Max before the show, with their classic collections, was they didn't really define these consoles to having one game from each franchise. The NES Classic has Mario 1, 2, and 3.
Yep.
The the SNES Classic has Mario World and Yoshi's Island and Mario RPG. This only has Resident Evil 1, right? When Resident Evil 2 is like, that's an awesome game. It's a much better game.
Yeah.
The director's cut of the original Resident Evil is not even the best port of that game. Like there's a lot of weird music issues with that game. There's a Final Fantasy game on here, but it's 7 and there isn't 8. Like there's a lot of
9 are in here.
Yeah, exactly.
meanwhile, you can get 7. It's coming to Switch. You can get an iPhone. And it's got like weird optimization stuff where you can skip through random encounters. You can like burn through it.
Yeah. I think for that they want to maintain the posterity of what these things look like originally. But it's weird to see that like Final Fantasy VII is ported to everything in the world, but Crash Bandicoot can't come to the system. So like it all depends on the third party.
But again, it's all different companies, right? Like
course.
that's Square Enix more likely to want to play ball with something cool like this.
Yeah, and like what Max said about like the Crash Bandicoot being their mascot of the time and now not being on the system, then this is a system that doesn't have mascots yet, because this is before Kratos, Alloy, Nathan Drake, Sackboy, none of these people have Spider-Man.
Classic Sony character.
Yeah.
It is that very strange thing to me too. You were mentioning only having one game per list. Let's pretend that the remake and remaster issue, wasn't a problem. Then if they only limited this thing to 20 games, Spyro and Crash would have and probably should have taken up 6 spots then. Like that's
all
one
3
of the
games from each.
You could leave off.
Well, that's
I feel like Crash Team Racing is one of those games that like
CTR should have been.
CTR should have been on here.
Yeah.
Wipeout should have been on here.
It's funny that we get RE1 and then Cool Borders 2. Frequently, the second game is the better game in video games.
But RE2 has that remake coming out, and so
exactly, yeah, they want to sell that.
Capcom doesn't want.
They're like we've got people's nostalgia like right here, like we're not gonna give you that.
Yeah. Whereas like Nintendo is not making a crazy Super Mario World remake and doesn't want to put Mario World in the NES. But yeah, that would.
My
be
big hang up on this is that it's not DualShock. It's not DualShock compatible in any sense.
So
that was a huge misstep from the just from the announcement. Man.
We also don't know anything about the UI really. Like, is it going to have the cool sort of easy suspend state that
so it will have there is a button on the system that will be a like save and suspend thing.
Okay, cool.
But we don't know what it looks like in terms of the frames and the
right.
The
I do hope it looks like I think the UI for the NES Classic and the SNES Classic look really bad and like really this is like a personal aesthetic kind of thing. But I hope that Sony improves on that and makes it look a little more sleeker. Like maybe use like kind of the nostalgia like 90s vibe to it, but make it not.
Look we don't. This is going off script a little bit, but we don't know if this is going to be hackable. Like there's a lot of
true.
My 100-mile down look on this thing is that like it's missing this, it's missing this, it's missing this, and then you go but
there's
but and then you name a classic game and you're like okay
I'll play the original Rayman again.
Yeah.
Like it. I don't think for me it personally justifies the $100, but I am still intrigued enough to want to get it. I do think I'm curious what you all think. Now that we know this is the way the system is coming, these are the games it's coming with. What do you think they could do better if they do a PS2 Classic? If they do more iterations of this, because I think both Nintendo and now Sony have made some missteps with these. They're making them to be cheap in a way. Like I don't understand the limitation of the number of games. Like, sure, you don't want to put 200 on here, yes, but why cap it at 20?
Well, we said
that's a big.
Yeah, we said years ago, like on Nintendo Voice Chat, when we first started talking about these classic systems, which obviously Sony is directly lifting from Nintendo here, who directly lifted from, Sega and everybody else who is making these like set top box things that they sell at malls and end caps at Walgreens, is that these are not necessarily for the most hardcore gamers. These are for people who go, okay, you know what? I'm in a store. I'm buying Christmas gifts. Oh my God, there's a small PlayStation here, and it's got all these games on it. Oh, I love this. I have nostalgia for this. I don't remember this one. Blah 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 blah. And what's cool about them is that like when you're not playing them, they're aesthetically pleasing. They're gorgeous to look at. They're fun little toys that you stick underneath your television.
But is it really for those types of people who are just like shopping around? Because like the NES Classic and the SNES Classic, to a lesser extent, were almost impossible to find.
Well, yes. So I think that's entirely Nintendo being like, manufacturing shortages. There was a fire at the docks.
It doesn't surprise me that the creators
The
of
elves were
Amiibo
killed.
were
Well, I mean,
whoops.
I do think
they sold them all. They didn't have any. They didn't have any spare stock kicking around, making them look bad.
There are interesting choices. I mean, for me, I think one of the ones that really stood out is Rainbow Six being on there. Yeah. Because I can't speak to many people here, but I don't know people who are like the original Rainbow Six is really that franchise's best. But at the same
I didn't
time,
know that the franchise existed before the 360.
but the thing is, like Siege is
like
a huge game right now.
That was like a PC
So-
game back then.
Yeah.
There's also I don't know Persona that well. I'm pretty sure that the first Persona
quite different.
people
Yeah, I was
aren't
talking to
wild
Andrew
about that
about it.
one.
Yeah.
People were like, is it like the,
even Andrew Goldfarb is like, whatever.
Yeah, I was gonna say if like the most hardcore Persona fans we know are sort of like, shruggy about this one.
Yeah.
I don't know how this list came together. It's interesting. Like I feel like if you had gotten like a focus group of like 500 hardcore PlayStation fans and you said write down your top 5, favorite PlayStation 1 games, and then you sort of aggregated that list and you put together this like Frankenstein version of like people's memories.
Yeah.
I think you probably would have come up with something better than this. There's just it's weird. In terms of your question for the second one, I mean, if they do a PlayStation 2 Classic, obviously getting the controllers right off the bat, I would say I don't think 20 games is enough. I believe there was 30 on the NES Classic, but was there 20 on the SNES?
I think it was 22.
It was
smaller-
down to
smaller
20
games.
Yeah, smaller games.
They weren't putting them on CDs. They were putting them on little.
Well, this is
carts.
$100 though. You
Yeah.
know, this is significantly more
So
money.
here's another thing. If this is effectively like a little Raspberry Pi / Android device that, it's the guts of it are it's advanced enough to justify the price tag, but still there's room to grow there. Sony has an infrastructure that lets you download PlayStation 1 games. They have the PS1 classics out there. We know that. They tried to sell that little Vita TV thing. People barely love the Vita. Vita TV was another thing entirely, or PS TV, whatever they call it.
They were ahead of their time.
What if they were just like, hey, here's the PS1 Classic 2 or whatever the hell they call it. It's got a wireless adapter and you can go on the PSN store and download all your favorite stupid games that we figured out the rights to on there. Like, that would be pretty cool.
I'd rather just play it on my PS4 at this point, Like whatever PS1 classics or PS2 classics are available on the PSN, PS4 store, I'd rather just play it there and not have to buy another little thing. Then they'll probably force me to buy those games as well to download from PSN.
Well, that's the thing. Like when the NES Classic came out, the Wii U was a thing, and it had a virtual console, and you had the option to buy those games there individually for $5 a piece.
Yeah.
Nowadays on Switch, there's Nintendo Online. It's got like 20-something NES games on there too. There's options there. This exists in lieu of that being a possibility on PS4, and we've said that before.
Yeah.
I'm glad this thing's here. I'm glad people are talking about PS1 Classic games again. Put them on your new system. Put them on your PS4.
I'm very curious to see what they end up doing with PS Now. Them changing the ability to download games and keep them offline for a certain amount of time with PS2 and PS4 games, I think is very telling of what they want to do with that. And I'm curious to see, one, how the success or, depending on how it sells, failures of the PS Classic will inform that, or if they will really charge ahead and do what Xbox has done with Game Pass and backwards
Hey, so
compatibility.
here's the thing. I really want to play Metal Gear Solid. So I might buy this stupid little thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to also because I've never played in full the original Metal Gear Solid, and since this is now an easy way to do
very
that.
Are you a
exciting.
fan of Metal Gear Solid?
I enjoy Metal Gear Solid.
I didn't know that.
Speaking of Metal Gear Solid, it is one of the games, specifically Metal Gear Solid 5, one of the games on our best 25 PS4 games fall 2018 update. We update the top 25 games every 6 months or so, every spring and fall, and we put out our revised list last week.
Boy, people are mad about it.
And they're always mad. Max, you were unfortunately out of the office. In your name, we made sure Yakuza Kiwami ended up on the list.
Hell yeah. People are going to be mad that it wasn't Zero.
Yeah.
They really are.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I
think
knew
they're
you
right,
would care.
honestly. Zero's a better game.
Well,
you guys screwed up.
We're trying to be nice to you, Max.
Are you kidding me?
Oh, we
talking
all in the
about-
room
yeah,
were like,
we specifically said like, is it Kiwami or Zero that we think? And we
God,
thought
why
it
don't
was
we ever
Kiwami.
listen to that guy? His shirts are so stupid, and he's just
God.
his hair.
anyway, so
We were like, this is
Great.
one of those things we were like, it was like being at a loved one's grave, and we're like, he really would have loved this.
Yeah.
I love that you guys pulled like a mom move and got the wrong game.
Yeah.
Like you were like, oh, he keeps talking about those games. I can't remember which is the one he wanted. Is it the new one? And it's just
well,
Did you
A
get
lot
gift?
of fucking people saw that list.
good
I just
news.
want if you're mad about that,
Jonathan.
I like. We're updating the list in the spring, so if you're mad about that, we'll update in the spring. The time is.
I feel like that's
Okay,
not
I
even
want
the
to
one.
say aside from this,
all right.
I really like this list. I really do.
Okay.
You guys?
I do too.
No,
you were in the room.
I was in the room. I
Oh,
don't hate.
that's funny.
Well, I was just thinking of like people are probably mad that we put Fortnite at top 10, and I think
So,
we had it above something.
part
that people were
part of
upset
the
about.
Last of Us specifically, part of the list's considerations are one, the timeliness of the games, their cultural importance,
put
and
the Fortnite above The Last of Us.
yeah,
It's not
because
called the Fortnite.
the Fortnite.
All right, Dad.
Mom.
We did it because it's
What do you want to be for
important
Halloween?
the
Is it the
kids.
Fortnite?
The reasoning for that is because The Last of Us is essentially still a PS3 game, and even though this
I
is
don't
like
care. I'm just making fun of you.
Yeah.
I get
All
to
right,
be with the.
Grandpa.
I wasn't in the room. Hey, gamers! I have the real PlayStation passion, and I don't agree with any of these guys. I think Yakuza 0 is the best one on the PS4, and I think The Last of Us is better than the Fortnite.
What's number 2?
Well,
Bloodborne?
guess what? I get to publish the list, so when I publish it in the spring, Kingdom Hearts 3 is number 1, you assholes.
Perfect.
Anyway,
John,
moving on.
What was the top 3?
So the top 3, I can do the top 10 because there
Yeah,
are
yeah.
additions in there. From 10 to number 1, Fortnite changing places with The Last of Us Remastered. Number 9, Grand Theft Auto 5. 8, Uncharted 4, Thief's End. 7, Marvel's Spider-Man. 6, Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. Number 5, Horizon Zero Dawn. Number 4, Persona 5. Shouts to Andrew. Number 3, The Witcher 3. Number 2, Bloodborne. And number 1, God of War.
That's
I
a
really- yeah.
that's a good ass.
I really like that.
So yeah, part of the intention of this list, regardless of the specific placement of games, is you just bought a PS4. What are the games you want to play or you should play? And I think that top 10 overall, if you bought all 10 of those games, you would have a hell of a
pretty set.
time.
Yeah.
You are
Yeah.
in pretty good condition. We had God of War at number 2 when we published in the spring, and
we're
Bloodborne at number 1.
cowards.
Well, it was literally the list I think published a week or a couple weeks after God of War came out.
Right.
Cowards.
There's a bit of recency bias. We wanted to make sure we were checking ourselves. Obviously, we put it at number 2 so we didn't hate the game in any way. But we put it at number 1. At least I personally wanted it to be at number 1, especially because of the impact it has had on me and the way I have looked at every game since then has always been a lot in terms of how does that aspect of the game compare to what God of War did with that?
Yes.
And especially not just that, but the imprint God of War has had on my mind in its story, in its art, like artistic merits, in its gameplay.
How the world connects to each other. The like just how beautiful that game is.
Yeah, the beauty of
yeah.
that game as a holistic product. I think of my favorite pieces of art are the ones where every part of it is working in concert to make a greater whole. And I think God of War exemplifies that better than almost any game.
It's a fantastic showcase for that platform too.
Yes.
Like to be like, this is Sony firing on all cylinders. This is them. This effectively like sort of encapsulates their mantra perfectly of like, this is what the PlayStation is now. Do you remember that thing you thought it was with Kratos and everything like that? He's back. We're back. Here's the system. Here's everything. It's better than it's ever been before. And like, honestly, gun to head, if you said, what are the best 2 games on PlayStation 4? I'd be like God of War and Bloodborne. So I could not be happier with the top 2.
I also just, for me personally, with the Switch, I would recommend God of War to people more than I would Bloodborne because there is that, it's tough. Like you said before, Bloodborne does a really great job of weeding out people who are not going to be able to stick with that game.
I played the first 10 minutes and that's all I could do.
What?
I know I'm bad at games.
Cowards.
You don't want to kill that guy with a pitchfork 18 times.
Away!
You don't want to like do a speed rush to the boss and then die so you can actually play the game.
There's this guy in the top of the stairs at the beginning of the game. He's got this frizzy Muppet hair, and he hits you with his shield and
Yeah.
tries to kill you with a cleaver.
Yeah, I really hate it.
There's a horse skeleton. God, that game's great.
I got to like the third boss of that game and I'm stuck. I love that game. It's so good. I really love that game. I haven't seen most of it.
You can
I'm
pull
a
it.
fake fan.
You can
but I
pull a
think it's
gem
great.
out of a pig's ass.
Really?
You can do that in Assassin's Creed as well.
In a pig's
Anyway.
ass, you can.
So yeah, our new best 25 games for PS4 are up now. We'll put Yakuza 0 on in the spring. Yes.
We should say real quick that we very strategically sort of revamped all of these lists right before Red Dead came out.
Yes. Yeah.
Because like you said, the sort of recency bias is one thing, but you'll see the impact that that game had in spring when we
Absolutely,
re-release the list.
And-
Because I think there'd be a lot of like, it's here, #1 game of all time. And it's like, it's been an hour. Give it some time.
And especially with the recency of God of War, we were able to have enough people play it who were impacting that list and play it through to completion. Whereas now, even like you've played 35 hours, but you still haven't finished that.
Yeah,
game.
I think
yeah,
God, I'm like 32 hours in, and I'm still like only 50% of the way through the story. So
Yeah.
I'm tired.
So anyway, we'll be updating that list again in the spring, and you can yell at us all again.
Yeah. Also, if
Put
you're,
Fortnite at number 5.
if you're hearing this and you don't have a PS4 yet, and you get a PS4 for Christmas, hoo boy, are you in for a treat?
Yeah, you have a lot to play and a lot of great stuff. Moving on, speaking of other things you could be playing, the drop, just wanted to mention very quickly, we won't be able to talk about it. The day this show is publishing is Halloween. That is the day the Medieval trailer is coming out, the first actual trailer, not just a logo reveal. Sean Layden on the PlayStation Blogcast recently talked about how that is a remake and not a remaster. There was some debate about what those words actually meant.
I'm glad he clarified that, because there's been a lot of confusion in the last couple of years of what makes it a remake and what makes it a remaster.
Well, and also it just seems like such an odd thing for them to really be holding this thing up and for it to just be like a cleaned up remaster.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, I think of it more as probably what Shadow of the Colossus was to an extent for this game.
I
So
hope it's as beautiful, Shadow of the Colossus.
I hope so too. And then also the Tetris Effect, which will be available for PS4 and PSVR enabled.
Sorry, why'd you
I
say
just-
that like you're trying to have sex with Shadow of the Colossus?
So weird.
Do you know what
No,
Barrett
because
gets
I
up
just
to in
think
his
it would be
spare
funny
time?
if they put that level of detail in a game like Medieval.
You look
Barrett,
at it, it was
it's-
like
it's
you were trying to romance someone at a Ren fair.
Barrett, it's a podcast, not a candle at dinner.
Hey, I hope Medieval is very beautiful. Happy Halloween.
Oh boy. Anyway,
But none as attractive as you, madame. For you, the horsey game with the robot men for to climbing is none like the love I believe. BC Barrett Courtney.
this is like the comments section of our best 25 games. Also, a Tetris Effect limited time demo is coming out between November 1st and November 5th. We won't be able to talk about that while it's going on. So just so you know,
Probably
that is
talk about it
happening.
next week, then.
We'll talk about it after. Ryan McCaffrey is very excited for that game. I am too, because Tetris is great.
I hope it's as beautiful as Shadow of the Colossus.
I think Tetris has had its effect on me.
None are as sensual as the square block. Oh, the square. You're my love. You're the light of my life.
Oh, L Block. For the nights I long of thee.
Anyway, moving on. Before we get to a little bit of Max, I want to hear about your Japan trip. But first, speaking of Japan, Kingdom Hearts 3
I'll put
coming out
1
January
minute on the clock real quick. Actually,
Go ahead.
What in the hell
Go
is
ahead.
that?
You go
Hold
ahead.
on.
Jonathan, we never talked about those screenshots with those goth boys looking all sad at that weird phone.
Yeah, that's
All
what
right.
this minute's going to be about. But also,
Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. 3, 2, go.
So I have with me a apparently life-size accurate Keyblade. It's not real. This is wonderfully foamed, so you won't get hurt too bad. You'll probably still get hurt. I carry this thing around with me like a giddy little school child. It is wonderful. I love having it so much. Anyway, Brian Altano came over to my desk like a week or so ago, week and a half, and asked me, who are these children? They were Roxas's friends in Twilight Town. Having to describe to Altano in the middle of the bullpen, I didn't want to do this, but essentially that Roxas is Sora's nobody, which when Sora died, he was turned into a heartless,
Charlie Horse.
a heartless and a nobody. His nobody, Roxas, was living in somewhat of like a fictionalized version of the real town, Twilight Town, because they were trying to deal with his essence. There's a lot to deal with that.
I hate that I actually know this.
Yeah. Anyway, trying to explain to him that they were friends to this character who is part of Sora, but is also not Sora and his own being. Didn't feel like it was worth getting into at like 4:30 p.m. on a day. So I stopped there. Nonetheless, boy, we saw a lot more of Kingdom Hearts 3. We have some now Olympus Coliseum screenshots.
Time's
just
up.
Olympus itself. God damn it.
You upset Max so much that you gave him a Charlie horse in the middle of
bored
this.
me so much I almost fell out of my chair, and then I got a Charlie horse in my leg, and it still really hurts.
Kingdom Hearts 3 comes out January 29th on Xbox One and PS4.
You can fight Charlie Horse in the Lamb Chop Land level.
He's the Toy Story character they don't want you to know about.
The great thing about this game is that I can ask you a question about it, and you can explain it to me, and I'll know less about it than
you
when I
did.
started.
Yep, yeah. Anyway, moving on to something Max you may want to actually talk about. You were in Japan.
Yeah,
Quite
I was in Japan for 2 weeks.
How was it?
It was awesome. It was a grand old time. I mean, people were like, "How was it?" It's 2 weeks in Japan.
Yeah.
It's just a sort of shotgun blast of culture shock. Everyone should go to Japan if you grew up with video games and nerd stuff. Like if you're listening to a PlayStation podcast, you should try to go to Japan. This was my honeymoon, and luckily my wife is a huge dork just like me, so she was very cool to my wife. I think literally my waifu while we were there. You know, that was you can say that there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we just bummed around and checked out a bunch of like weird, nerdy stores and saw the sights and did a lot of stuff. The first place I stayed was in Shinjuku, right by Kabukicho, which is effectively the setting of Yakuza. Like we stayed, like our hotel overlooked the batting cages, which is like a place you regularly have to go to beat the crap out of guys with park benches. I found like an iconic parking lot from these video games, and it was like I played, like GTA 5 and gone to LA and been like, this is odd. I think I've been here before. I've never done the thing where I've played numerous video games in one setting and then gone to some place and had that constant sense of deja vu, which was incredibly strange. And then we got to go to Osaka, and there's an area there called Dotonbori in real life. I keep mixing up the video game version and the fake one. And it's one of the settings of Yakuza Kiwami and Zero. And so I got to poke around there, and it was like, I know exactly where I am because of a fake video game. That's weird.
Did you punch anybody?
I didn't punch anybody. I didn't do that. I didn't.
Did you hit anyone with like a cone that you just found on the street?
No, but it's weird because they have different cones, and they have these little, like, all of the stuff in Yakuza is so incredibly like detailed and accurate. In like, okay, one thing I learned, nobody locks up their bicycles. So in those games, when people pick up a bicycle and use it as a weapon, I was always like, oh, that's weird. In real life, those would be chained up. So, and then I went there, and I was like, oh, this is like such a crime-free society, aside from the bicycle fights, that actually makes sense. Also, you regularly have to go in elevators that take forever because they're PlayStation 3 load screens or whatever. The elevators are actually that slow.
Yeah.
So I learned a valuable lesson about video games in real life. But yeah, I got to, I bought a Solid Snake action figure and.
You bought a lot, didn't you?
I bought a lot of stupid things, a lot of dumb toys and weird stuff. I went to 2 different Super Potatoes, looked at all the video games.
Did you buy any old games?
No, I didn't. Like it's just kind of it's always nice to do that. I feel bad. I feel like I'm poaching because like
That's exactly what it is, actually. That's one of the reasons a lot of those shops are picked clean, is because their culture for so long was buy retro games, play them, and bring them back and trade them back in. And then us and the other plundering white men from the world would show up to places like that, buy retro games, which I'm very guilty of, and then just hoard them and put them on our desks at work or keep them at home in the packaging. And so there's a finite amount of those things, obviously, because they're not printing new versions of the original Metal Gear.
Yeah.
And so, they got kind of picked clean.
no, like part of me was like I should find like the MSX2 cartridge for like Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, and I was like, no, I shouldn't, because I don't have an MSX, and I don't even know if that was a cartridge or a CD or what it was. Like I don't, like why bother? Like why should I do that? So I bought a Solid Snake action figure instead, and
And if there's 20 specific classic games that you want to play, it's coming out this holiday season.
Hold on,
Barrett?
the MSX2 Classic.
And they're all classics, but none quite as beautiful as you, Shadow of the Colossus.
The Tetris Square. Anyway, well, Max, I'm glad you had a good time, and I'm glad you're back.
Thanks.
Glad to
Yeah,
have
it's
you
good to be back.
So when you're in Japan, check out the Bicycles, Elevators, and Cones by Max.
I don't know.
Best cones in the
check out
world.
everything. Like people kept asking me, like, what did you do? And like, hands down, the coolest thing was the Studio Ghibli Museum, which is a huge pain in the ass to get tickets for. I think specifically because Hayao Miyazaki doesn't want foreigners going to learn about the history of Totoro. But we got some anyway. It's just every moment there is just kind of incredible. anybody who's played Persona 5, Shibuya Station, is exactly that confusing in real life. It's actually more so confusing right now because everything's getting renovated for the Olympics in 2020. Because Neo Tokyo is about to explode.
So that fake toy gun shop is not going to be there, I assume.
They do have those, and it's really kind of bizarrely frightening. Like I was in
because
this,
they're super realistic over there. Right?
I was in a Don Quixote, which is sort of like if you took like a Walmart and like stacked it into like a 6-story building, and then had all the signs be hand painted and incredibly claustrophobic, and also sold lots of dildos. And the mascot was a penguin wearing a Santa Claus hat. It keeps getting weirder. I was just walking around in there, and I walked around a corner, and there's this giant rack of like hyper-realistic airsoft guns that I don't even think had like the orange tips on them that you have here because they don't really have a problem with like cops shooting kids there. So it's just sort of like, there's that Persona 5 gun shop.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Also, I don't know. It was odd. I felt like there were Red Dead ads everywhere. A lot of Dragon Quest stuff, obviously. As far as like what was sort of like popular and trendy, I felt like I almost felt like there wasn't. I didn't really see any Metal Gear merch anywhere. Like there wasn't as much of a footprint of that as I was anticipating. And then
you didn't go into the pachinko parlors then.
Yeah, exactly. I did go into one, and Jen was like, "Oh, this is like hell," and I'm like, "Yes, it is like hell."
No, I went into one with Mitch Dyer in 2014, and we both immediately got sick. Like we walked out and had colds because it's basically this 3-story screaming loud building where it just sounds like metal balls are getting shot with rifles, and everyone is chain smoking. So you just walk in, it's like, you're like, I can't breathe. Yeah. And then you open the door and you're back outside in Japan, and it's just like quiet, and people are like, hello, what's up, it's just like very chirpy and quiet.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. So
Yeah.
I had a good time. And
Go there and explore.
yeah, that's really it. Just
Yeah, it seems like the best way to experience it. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you had a great time. And I've had a great time on this show.
I hate that you've been holding this keyblade for the last like 10 minutes.
If I could say anything as parting words, remember.
Oh no, you're not stepping down as host of Podcast Beyond, are you?
Already?
I must.
That'd be
I
really
must go. The kingdoms need me.
Shut up.
If I could leave you with any parting words, your friends are your power. And if you don't have friends, be sure to go to facebook.com/group/podcast beyond to find a whole group of friends you can talk about PlayStation with.
That whole transition upsetted me.
This has been Beyond, episode 565. Barrett, where can people find you on Twitter?
At Sadboy Barrett.
Max?
Max Scoville. And seriously, I wasn't overreacting. That was a really bad Charlie horse. Usually I get those late in the night.
And Brian, where can people find you?
At Agent Bizzle.
And I am at JM Dornbush. Again, thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of Beyond. And as always, Beyond.
Beyond.
You truly belong with us here in the clouds. You shadow of the Colossus.
None quite as beautiful as you.
Oh, boy.